For 60 long years, a single house tucked into the green hills of Aldermere kept a secret that no lawyer, no minister, and no royal servant ever dared to say out loud. It had no golden gates. It never appeared on any official list. But the people who knew the truth understood one thing. Whoever controlled that house would one day quietly control the future of the crown itself. And on the morning everything finally came to light, the person who won it was the one nobody expected. And the family who lost it would never forgive what the old queen had done from beyond the grave. Cedar Hollow was not the kind of place that made headlines. It sat far from the busy palaces, hidden behind a wall of old cedar trees that gave the estate its name. Most people in the kingdom had never even heard of it. Yet inside the royal household, Cedar Hollow was spoken about in low voices, the way people talk about something valuable and dangerous at the same time. The house had belonged to Queen Rowena, the old queen, for almost her entire life. She had spent her childhood summers there. She had hidden there during the hard years of her reign, and in her final decade, when her body grew weak but her mind stayed sharp as a blade, she had begun making quiet arrangements about its future. Her grandson, Prince Edmund, knew almost nothing about any of this. He was a serious young man, more comfortable with duty than with luxury, and he had never once asked his grandmother for anything. When she was alive, he visited Cedar Hollow only to sit with her by the fire and listen to her old stories. He never guessed that those long, gentle afternoons were part of a plan she had been building for years. Meanwhile, others were watching the estate very closely. Queen Mirabel, the second wife of the reigning king, had spent nearly 20 years carefully building influence inside the family. She was clever, patient, and ambitious in a way that never showed on her calm face. Her son from an earlier marriage, Lord Cassius, shared her hunger, though he was louder about it. For a long time, Mirabel and Cassius had assumed that Cedar Hollow would eventually pass into the general royal holdings, where they had quietly gained control over many decisions. They imagined turning the old house into something modern and profitable, a luxury retreat perhaps, with their family name attached to it. They spoke of it as if it were already theirs, and no one, not even the king, seemed prepared to argue. The old queen was gone. Her wishes, most people believed, had died with her. But Rowena had not been careless. She had spent her final years placing invisible locks on the one thing she cared about most. The house was waiting, and so was the truth. The trouble began quietly, the way most real trouble does. A few months after Queen Rowena's death, Lord Cassius arrived at Cedar Hollow with a small group of advisors and a folder full of plans. He walked through the old rooms like a man measuring furniture he expected to sell. He talked openly about knocking down walls, adding modern wings, and opening the grounds to wealthy guests who would pay handsomely for a taste of royal history. The staff at Cedar Hollow said nothing, but they watched. Many of them had served the old queen for decades. They had promised her in her final months that they would keep the house exactly as it was until the right hands took charge. They did not yet know whose hands those would be, but they were certain, watching Cassius, that his were not the ones. Word of the visit reached Prince Edmund through an old servant who had known him since childhood. Edmund listened carefully but reacted calmly. He had no proof of any wrongdoing, and he was not a man who chased conflict. Still, something about the story unsettled him. His grandmother had loved Cedar Hollow more than any crown or jewel. It felt wrong that its fate was being decided by people who had never sat with her by that fire. Quietly, Edmund began to ask questions. Not loud, public questions, careful ones. He spoke to the estate's oldest lawyer, a man near the end of his own life, who had served Queen Rowena for over 40 years. At first the lawyer said little, but when Edmund mentioned that Cassius was already making plans, something changed in the old man's eyes. "You should know," the lawyer said slowly, "that Her Majesty was far wiser than people believed. She saw all of this coming, years ago." He explained that the old queen had not simply left instructions that could be ignored or challenged. Instead, she had built a special kind of protection into the estate, a legal arrangement so carefully designed that it could not be undone by ordinary means. It would stay silent and invisible, the lawyer said, until certain exact conditions were met. Edmund asked what those conditions were. The lawyer only smiled a tired smile and said the answer would reveal itself when the time was right. Across the kingdom, Mirabelle sensed that something was slipping. She had built her power on knowing everything before anyone else. Yet now, whispers reached her that Edmund had been meeting quiet men in quiet rooms. For the first time in years, she felt a small, cold thread of worry. She told Cassius to move faster. He, in his arrogance, ignored her warning. He believed the house was already won. He did not understand that the old queen had left a trap sealed shut for exactly this moment, and that it was about to open. The truth surfaced on an ordinary gray afternoon, without drama or ceremony. Cassius had pushed too far. In his eagerness, he ordered workers to begin surveying Cedar Hollow for his planned changes, measuring rooms, marking walls, treating the house as his own before any official approval had been given. It was exactly the kind of action the old queen had feared. And it was exactly the condition her hidden arrangement had been waiting for. The moment those surveyors set foot inside with the intent to alter the house, a sealed legal instrument, quietly signed years earlier, and held by the estate's trusted lawyers, became active. It was a covenant trust, built with unusual strength. Under its terms, the instant anyone attempted to change or commercialize Cedar Hollow, full stewardship of the estate would pass immediately and permanently to a single named heir. That heir was Prince Edmund. There was no shouting match, no dramatic courtroom scene. The change happened through paper and law, silent and total. By the time Cassius realized what he had triggered, it was already done. The house he had walked through so confidently no longer answered to him. It never truly had. When the news reached Queen Mirabelle, she did not scream. People who saw her that day said her face simply went still, the way calm water goes still before it freezes. Years of patient planning, of quiet positioning, of imagining her family's name carved into that ancient estate, all of it had collapsed in an afternoon. Undone by a woman who had been dead for months. Cassius took it far worse. He argued. He demanded reviews. He accused the old lawyers of trickery, but every path he tried led to the same wall. The arrangement had been built precisely to survive anger like his. There was nothing to break because the old queen had left nothing loose. Edmund himself did not celebrate. When he learned the truth, he felt no triumph, only a strange, heavy quiet. He understood at last why his grandmother had spent those long afternoons with him by the fire. She had not been passing time. She had been choosing, testing, deciding, slowly and secretly, who could be trusted with the one place she loved most. He walked through Cedar Hollow that evening alone. The old servants, the ones who had promised to protect it, met him in the hall. They did not bow with fear or flattery. They bowed with relief. The right hands had finally come. Outside, the news spread through the royal household like a slow tide. Some were shocked. Some were secretly glad. And in the quiet corners of the palace, people whispered the same stunned question again and again. How had a grandmother, gone from the world, still managed to win a battle no one knew she was fighting? In the weeks that followed, the kingdom slowly settled around the new reality. Prince Edmund said very little in public about Cedar Hollow. When people praised him, he turned the praise aside. When people asked whether he had planned any of it, he answered honestly that he had not. He had inherited not a prize, he told those close to him, but a responsibility, one his grandmother had trusted him to carry. That quiet response won him something Cassius had never managed to buy: genuine respect. In a royal family often tangled in rivalry and pride, here was a young man who had gained a great deal, and yet behaved as though he had gained nothing but duty. Ordinary people, tired of palace scheming, found the story oddly comforting. At least once, it seemed, the outcome had been decided by patience and love instead of ambition. Queen Mirabelle never spoke openly about her defeat. She continued to appear at official events, calm and polished as always. But those who knew her well noticed a small change, a new caution, a sense that she had finally met a mind she could not outmaneuver. The old queen had beaten her without ever raising her voice, and Mirabelle understood, perhaps for the first time, how deeply she had underestimated the woman she had spent years standing beside. Cassius faded from the center of things. His loud plans, his confident measurements, his dreams of a family name carved into ancient stone, all of it dissolved into silence. He had believed that boldness was the same as strength. He learned, too late, that true strength often hides itself until the exact moment it is needed. As for Cedar Hollow, it stayed exactly as Queen Rowena had wished. No new wings, no wealthy guests, no name attached to it for profit. The old cedar trees still guarded the walls. The fire still burned in the room where a grandmother had quietly shaped the future, one gentle afternoon at a time. Edmund visited often. He would sit in her old chair, in the fading light, and think about how much she had understood that others had missed. She had known that power built on noise never lasts. She had known that the most important decisions are the ones made softly, in advance, long before anyone realizes a decision is even being made. And in that silent house among the hills, one truth remained, that the old queen, long after her final breath, had proven she was still the wisest player in a game the others never even knew they were losing. Perhaps that was the real lesson buried inside Cedar Hollow. Not that Edmund had won, and not that Mirabelle's family had lost, but that legacy, when built with care and patience, can reach across time itself, and settle old questions long after the one who asked them has gone.